Good afternoon. It is 12 noon. Welcome to the Dorman Lunch and Learn. This is our heavy duty series. My name is G. Trulia. I'm just going to be introducing the guy who's going to be teaching us, a great instructor, Swede Oun, Dorman Training products, does great aftermarket stuff, not only for light duty, but for heavy duty, okay? And this is going to be a series once a month. We're going to be doing a heavy duty type class. And here is the instructor, Swede Oun. Swede and I go back many, many years. He's worked on a lot of heavy duty stuff, has taught all over the place. And he's going to help you out today. If you have questions, I will monitor the chat. And with that being said, Swede, my buddy, take it away.
Oh, thank you for that great introduction, G. I'm going to slide forward because he already had a few of these slides here. There's no sense in going into what I'm doing. Just before I even get started, I just want you to see this real fast. I always try to do this. I call this my circle of knowledge. Basically says what I don't know, what I know I don't know, what I know. And of course, you know, I'm human just like everybody else. There's a lot of BS once in a while comes out, but actually goes hand in hand with the regulations, because one of the things with regulations is there is a lot of BS in there. Not necessarily BS, but it's kind of like he said this, she said this. Yeah, that's the way it is. And that's what I want to try to get rid of over here. So I'm going to jump right into this because we're doing this for about an hour. So I have a lot of slides, which, by the way, just so you know, if I don't necessarily get through every single slide, you most certainly have all the handouts in your packet over there. So plus also you got G's email. I'm not sure if you have mine, but, maybe I'll put that in there. So if you got any questions, go for it. Right off the bat, I just want to make sure everybody understands this is my slide. And this is just one of the many slides with responsibilities, because I also have it in conjunction with drivers, managers, owners, and law enforcement too. So basically, just keep this in the back of your head. Perform his or her duties within the laws, regulations, regardless, and I try to always point that out, of whether or not there's specific laws governing repairs, technician is always liable for damage or injuries. And you got it in your handout, considering the lives, you know what you have to do. And this last paragraph here is the most important paragraph, guys. When you work on these vehicles, what keeps you out of trouble is you try to maintain the vehicles and components so they perform to original specs. To do any less could result in accident, injury, death, and so on. So why did we choose this particular with the regulations from the beginning, from the get-go? G and I were talking about it, that we are one of the most regulated industries in the world. Shouldn't say in the world, most certainly in America, but it also goes along with Canada and Mexico if they travel back and forth. So everything, if you're working in commercial motor vehicles and that commercial motor vehicle is earning money or whatever the case may be, you could be a carrier, it could be a fleet, whatever the case may be, you have to abide by the regulations. You're actually forced to work according to the regulations. And if you don't, the consequences can be from minor violations on roadsides, could be huge. It could affect your company. It could affect the owner. Most certainly, if a vehicle gets in an accident, let's face it, we got some nuclear verdicts out there and nobody likes trucks, and you're going to wind up getting some huge issues out there. And I'm not going to get into it, but there's another area in there, CSA scores, that when you get pulled over on a roadside, you have violations. It's going to affect insurance rates and so on, which this could be another seminar down the pike. But again, the bottom line is, those of you that are watching this right now, you're highly regulated. Everything you touch, you do on these vehicles. So let's get familiar with it, because when I do, it's just an hour version of something, but I do regulation courses that last all day. And I find that throughout the industry, very, very, very few people really have gotten into regulation books and tried to figure out what's going on. Why are they doing what they're doing? I get phone calls. Hey, I'm doing an inspection here. What should I do? This and so on. So let's get rolling here. There's a backstory to this one over here. Those of you that are watching that are into the heavy duty trucks and stuff, you know this is a brake shoe, minus the lining, of course. Okay, I'm not going to get into the backstory, but these are the types that once in a while you see out there, and it's huge. So keep that in mind. You know, this particular truck had 3 axle ends like that, and the guy was trying to do inspection, and I'll get into it in my future ones if I do brakes and stuff. We don't want that. Unfortunately, we see that out there. And if that vehicle gets pulled over on the roadside, you know what the consequences are there. Now, I want to say something. Chances are pretty good that if you're over here watching and you're from a fleet or you do that kind of work, you're going to kind of like shudder looking at, I'm not counting you people in here, hopefully, you know, because the people that try not to work on vehicles like that or try to prevent these kind of problems, they participate in training. So let me move on. This, believe it or not, was on the roadside. On the roadside. This vehicle was on the roadside. I mean, you got to hear this. You got to feel this. I mean, those days of turning up the radio to drown out noises, they're gone. All right. If you're here, this is our big concern over here with commercial motor vehicles. And this is from the fiscal year 2019. I don't even have other years on there. If you notice, one of the checks and balances that we have in our system working commercial vehicles is law enforcement going out there and they do these various inspections, you know, level 1, level 2, level 3, and that's done all over the country. So look at these numbers here. You have them in your handouts. Okay? And you can see that we have some very busy people out there. Busy meaning that doesn't matter if it's snowing. I'm from the Buffalo area. They're out there regardless. You know, that's their portion of job, or that's their dictate, their mandate, you know, that they're supposed to do. Check for vehicles. That's the checks and balances again. Very important. I mean, I can't emphasize this enough. These regulations apply to all employers, employees, and commercial motor vehicles that transport property, passengers, interstate commerce. It's right in the regulations. I pulled that right out of there, and it comes from this general knowledge 390.3 section, and we'll get into that. I don't even want to spend too much time on this. I gave you a couple of slides on handouts just to show you regulations. We've been regulated from day one during the first half of the 19th century, inspecting steamboats. Then it went into railroads. Then through the 1935 Motor Carrier Act, legislation actually dictated regulations. 66 saw the promulgation of federal motor vehicle safety standards. I'm going to stop here for a second. The federal motor vehicle safety standards, of course, I'm applying this to heavy trucks, vehicles, but they also, believe it or not, apply for cars. These are the standards that tell you, you know, the windshield should be like this. Your tires need to be like this. Brake lines, hoses, doesn't matter if it's hydraulic or air, they need to go through this type of testing. This is the type of lights you have to have on the vehicles. So that's where all that comes from the Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standards. And then read on and you'll see finally in 2000, new Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration was established. We call it the USDOT. Okay? The next slide, and go by it yourself, buzz through it, okay, because we got a lot to go through, but you can see over here, National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. Okay, those are the people that you get the recalls from. Every Monday morning, I go on that site. If you're into heavy duty, or I shouldn't say not just heavy duty, it's medium duty, heavy duty commercial motor vehicles, these are the people here, the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. They're kind of like God, they're on the top right now. So don't forget, many of you might be hauling or working with hazardous material. That's another entity over here. And of course, this you see on the news, doesn't matter if it's an airplane, if it's a train, if it's a bus or whatever, whenever there's a major mishap, these people come over here, National Transportation Safety Board. And don't forget EPA emissions, not getting it. But bottom line is FMCSR is the lead agency. Okay, so look at your list when you get it. These are the players over here. Okay, we're going to deal with this Federal Motor Carrier Safety Regulations. Out of service would be the CVSA. I'll get to that in a minute. I already mentioned the standards, vehicle safety standards. And don't forget, depending on where you're coming from, what state, each state, just substitute your own. You're going to have your own DOT. You're going to probably have your own DMV, and they will regulate it. I did throw in Society of Automotive Engineers. I belong to it. G belongs it. Okay. But just so you know, when you see the SAE, they do not have any legal authority. However, their standards are referenced and recognized by all the various entities. You see them mentioned in the books. Okay? Certifications, licenses. So if you're watching here one way or the other, if you don't, and I'll get into that, maybe you should. However, we have a bunch of different inspectors over here. One of the things definitely on the top of the list, and we're going to try to cover this, is this annual inspections. Okay, the federal inspections. Everything starts from there. Have to do it once a year. If you're into hauling hazmat cargo tanks, they get their own individual tests that they have to pass and muster through, pressures of the vessels and tanks. And I actually threw this in, the CNG tank inspection. If you see over there, you'll see a certificate up on top over here with the CNG. And what happens is, if you could zoom in on here a little. And this particular one over here, if you haul CNG, it's a form of a regulation and inspection. And these tanks have to be certified. What was it, Brian?
Once a year, heavy duty.
Once a year, every heavy duty. The only reason I asked Brian, yep, he's certified to do that. I actually paid. It was, quite pricey to do that, But anyway, brake inspections, I'll get into that. And of course, we're going to cover roadside inspections, Just to give you an idea, why would we do inspections? This was very, very timely as I was putting this together. I always try to update and do new things. Brian just happened to do an inspection on a CNG vehicle. This is from the factory, okay? And it actually had a leak, nothing major, but he has to put his name on it, and if you look over here, he takes the water soapy stuff and he looks for leaks and stuff. He's got to do it because his name goes on that certification. So you have those in your handouts too. So again, one form or the other, everybody's got to be licensed whenever they do something or certified. Now, this is the area we're going to get into a little bit. If you look over here, this is the safety regulations, okay? These are the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Regulations. They're in a book like this, and they're divided in all sorts of different parts over here, okay? The parts that they're divided into are 350, 399, 356, 379. I'm not even going to bother with this. In the very beginning, there's a part 40 that's strictly to do with drugs, alcohol testing, so on. What we would be more concerned with, not even if this was a driver, section or segment I'm doing, 382 is important, 383 is important, 390 is important for everybody, okay? 392 is somewhat important. The area, if this is maintenance related, this part 393, this is the area you need to be very, very comfortable with. Okay, because when you do annual inspections, it references that area over here. And for us guys in the maintenance, 396 inspection, repair, and maintenance is huge. Okay, and then at the end of this book, there's a minimum periodic inspection standards. I'll flip that out over here just so you have an idea. And maybe Brian can zoom in on this. Halfway decent. Okay. This is what we call Appendix A. All our annual inspections, if it's a federal inspection or if it's a New York State inspection, All right. Or your state inspection, if you do any kind of heavy annual inspection, that is your minimum requirements that you have to follow. And how would you even know to follow it or do an annual inspection if you've never gone into this book? So I'm going to repeat that over and over again. These books aren't that expensive. You know, if you're working on this, you really should get one. They actually have little pocket books, but however, if you're somebody who needs to wear glasses and stuff, you might have a hard time reading these. So that big book I had in my hand is huge. So, you know, remember I mentioned in the beginning that he said, she said, he said, you know, usually if I do a 6-hour one, I ask you a simple question. Is a heat shield mandatory on a vertical exhaust stack? That's like, for example, a truck that has the vertical muffler or stack over there. And as you're going in, you want to make sure you're not going to get burned or whatever, hot stack. So if I ask everybody, is this mandatory, this heat shield? Chances are pretty good. If I got 30 guys in the room, 28, 29 of them say, yep, oh yeah, it's mandatory. And I will turn around and say, no. What do you mean no? Everybody I talked to said you need it. If you go into the federal regulation books, 393.83 requires the replacement exhaust system in such a manner to prevent burning, charring. That's all that's required. It is not mandatory to have that unless you're putting it someplace where it can affect another portion of the vehicle. So hopefully you can see we're also going to try to get rid of some myths. So that a very important part 393, those regulations spell out the various parts, accessories, which must be included on motor vehicles and trailers. Consider that your Bible, you know, whether you do a preventive maintenance, whether you do whatever, or whether you're getting a vehicle ready for an inspection, you need to be very comfortable because that spells all that stuff out. Also spells out many performance requirements. Many cases, it'll specify the placement of certain parts. Good example of these are lights, reflectors, and conspicuity systems, okay? And again, Part 571 is also that federal motor vehicle safety standard as a reference for specific requirements put in place for manufacturers. Yeah. Let me back up to 393, and I'm going to open up this book real fast. And I'll get it to 393, and I'll have Brian zoom in on this. I'm going to go through 393. It starts at 393.9, and it goes on and on. But the big section in here is 393.11. So if you had access to this book, okay, what's going to happen is, this is a perfect sample. If you notice these pictures on there, okay, they're numbered. So a vehicle comes in and you're not quite sure, you know, say for example, you're doing an inspection. It's like, something tells me, is this supposed to have a reflector? Is this supposed to have this? And you're not quite sure. You shouldn't be guessing. Even in our shop, I get into this book. If I have any doubt in my mind, and of course these numbers here, let me show you a second here. These numbers correspond to a table that you see over there, and you look up the table and it'll tell you that, yep, it's supposed to have this, it's supposed to be there, but it gets a little deeper than that too, you know. We are not shamed over here. If we have any doubts, we go in here, and you'd be surprised how many times we find vehicles that have been inspected year after year. It's like, wait a minute, this was passed in some other shop or whatever the case may be. Reflectors missing, wrong colored light, and so on and so on. So it's not uncommon. I'm going to do something real fast. I'm going to turn on a trailer with a light, and I'm going to pose a question to you guys. Let me get this fired on. Okay. And I'm not quite sure. Hopefully you'll see it pretty good. Should I turn it or anything? Or
You can kind of go back and forth.
yeah. If I go like this, over here, you will notice something, okay? You will notice that this side over here is brighter than the other side. If we had time, I'd probably ask you a question, type it in the chat box. Why do you actually do that? Type in, why do you think this side is brighter than the other side? And I'll get into it a little bit later. The other thing is, if you can zoom over here, if you didn't see it in a book, because I'm not going to spend much time on lights. We're going to do a series on probably nothing but inspections. Eh? And you can see most certainly having it in color, and, you know, it's going to make a much, much more sense. I mean, you know, zoom in as far as you can even, you know. So, eh? But charts like that are very, very helpful for us, you know. So get comfortable with that information. That's why that book is so, so important. So that 393 I told you about, lamps 393.11, and it just goes on and on and on. There's notes and everything else. But these are all the rest of the stuff that's covered in 393, okay? Frames, wheels, and we'll get into a little bit of this, you know. And of course, I'm going to turn this one off here so the lights don't kind of, but, you know, she knows I like to mess around a little bit. So here's a nice little slide. Those of you that have to do inspections or ever get anything in, you know, customer came in with a vehicle, needs an inspection. Hey, it's a real world out there. So now my question is, if we were doing an actual class, you would all have a little pocket regulation book, and I would ask you, where would you find this? And what are you seeing over here? Seeing oil over here, right? So we don't have the time. I'm not doing that kind of a class right now, but keep it in mind. We could someday where everybody downloads the regulations, and we could do a little kind of like, okay, guys, take your time, see if you can find it. But what happens is you would find it not into 393. You would think it would be parts in there. It would be in 396, that maintenance section, okay? Hub and oil grease. Okay? I'm going to go forward a little. And in the 396.5, it says, every vehicle has to be free of oil and grease leaks. So when this vehicle gets pulled over from the side of the road and they see a oil leak, this is how it will be cited on a violation sheet, okay? And don't assume that it's going to be strictly just on a wheel seal related to wheels and so on. You got some excess oil coming up on any components of the vehicle. It says free of oil and grease leaks. It does not specify on brakes. There's another section on brakes. Again, I would tell you, where would you look for this type of violation? Okay? And here we go. There's another book. Right here. And if he zooms in over here, you'll see it's a North American Standard Out of Service Criteria. This is the book that the Roadside guys use. It comes out every single year. You can purchase them if you want. And this coincides with that green book over here. With this book over here that I had. Trying to get it in. But what happens is most of your violations really derive from this book. However, if you exceed that violation in the green book to the point that it becomes critical, then your vehicle will be put out of service. Basically, it's like, oh my, look at this. You're out of service. Put it over to the side, and you're not going to move it until you get somebody come tow it and repair it. So this is another book that you might want to get comfortable with, the North American Criteria, and this actually spells it out. If it's not in here, it's not going to get put out of service. So now I threw another book, and out of that book, this is where they derive this, for example, any bearing, hubcap, plug, or filler. Inspections. Remember the 396, maintenance and inspection? Every motor carrier and intermodal equipment must systematically inspect, repair, maintain, cause to be systematically inspected, repaired, all motor vehicles. So we'll make it very simple. What am I supposed to inspect? I don't know. Yes, you do know. You go and flip over into part 393. It's a very huge section. Remember, lights, tires, chassis, frames, everything that's in there, axles, that will tell you what you need to inspect. But it also gives you information that it has to pass this it has to stay within these limits here. Hubs, no visible, measurable lubricant showing hub. Now, keep in mind, too, if you're looking over here, and I'm showing these slides, I always got to try to tell everybody, preventable, non-preventable. In the back of your mind, try to kind of like imagine, gee, why is that so? Could that have been prevented? And that's one of our huge, big industry problem. We don't look at it that way. You know, why is it that way? Could that have been prevented? But you need to prevent that kind of stuff, because what you don't want is this. If you can see it real good, this wheel is ready to fly right off. Okay. I'm going to back up. I think I went one too far. I know why too.
I'm spinning it.
You're welcome, guys. What are we looking for over here? We're looking for a bearing that's starting to go. And when I put a lot of this stuff together, I'm always looking for ways of, I like the touchy-feely, the showy kind of stuff. And to me, you know, it's something that, you know, if you have suspect a bearing, go most certainly and try it, okay? I'm trying to also look at the chats here for a second. You know, some of the LEDs are bad, 2 different bulb types, you know. Let me tell you, LEDs are a perfect example. So I'm going to throw something in with these LEDs because the chat is over there on the LEDs. I'm going to break in a little bit. So if this vehicle comes in for inspection and you're following the annual inspection criteria in Appendix A. So the Appendix A, I showed you in the beginning, that's where your inspection, minimum inspection criteria is. So if you have a LED taillight, for example, say it has 9 LEDs in there and 2 of the LEDs are out, okay? Is it a violation? Actually, I'll try to watch the chat and type it in if you think it's a violation or not. Little reminder, regulation apply to all employees. What is a commercial motor vehicle? Any self-propelled or towed vehicle used on a highway and interstate. Gross vehicle combination 10,001. And keep this 10,001 pounds or more in mind. I'll make it very simple for you. I'm not going to worry about the passenger vehicles right now, but if you have a, say for example, 8,600 pound pickup truck, and now you're going to hook up to a trailer that's say 3,500 pounds. Do the math, add it together. Is that going to be over 10,001 pounds? Yes, it is. And if you're earning a living for it, and most of the time, for sure, if you're going interstate, but most of the time the states adopt the federal regulations, even if you're in interstate, you're going to be required to have a DOT number. And guess what? You're going to fall into the same categories as the big boys with the 18-wheelers, the tractor trailers. So keep that in mind. And they're easy picking on the roadside. Periodic inspection, okay? Every commercial vehicle operating interstate or foreign commerce must pass an annual, there's no ifs and buts about it. It has to get an annual inspection. Motor carrier that's in possession is responsible for the inspection. And again, we're not doing that go in the books where would you find this violation thing, okay? But it will be there. I'm messing with you guys. I'll back up a little. Where would you find it? Every time I do that, it's right there, guys. My way of saying, does everybody read, you know, when we go through these slides? But anyway, it's right in there, okay? At least once every 12 months, Appendix A, minimum periodic inspection, that's your Bible, okay? 14 inspection areas listed, established condition vehicle must meet to pass, okay? Some of the areas such as lighting are referenced in other areas, you know, so. Every commercial motor vehicle must be inspected as required by this section. Gives you the minimum parts, accessories set forth in Appendix A. This is why I keep saying, get comfortable with Part 393 and all that stuff. Okay? Because really, that's the basis. That's your Bible for your inspections. So, minimum requirement. Inspection must include at a minimum parts and accessories. We already said that, okay? So I threw a bullet point here. What does that mean? Can anyone doing inspections exceed this requirement? If so, how far can you exceed it? Can you shoot off the hip and decide what is passable, what is rejectable? What if you miss something critical? What if you reject something with no basis or criteria to back up your decision? I want you to think about all that stuff, because unfortunately, this is the world we live in. We do not have clear guidances from the feds or anybody that, yes, this is the way you should do it. Most of the states, including the federal government, under annual inspections, they leave it up to you to do this. And then if you get somebody that doesn't like what you did, you can get into these areas where you shouldn't have rejected it. You shouldn't have done this. And here we are with our fingers up our you-know-what. Okay? So this is my big kind of a bitch over here. I actually put a video together on showing how nobody's in sync with this, but we'll move on. Make sure the inspection is done properly. As a carrier, you're still responsible for the inspection. Okay? And that just spells out the various, who are you, are you licensed to do it? So here's your simplified take on this. Inspected in one of the state mandated programs. I'm from New York State. In New York State, we are registered based that if you register your vehicle, whether it be a car or truck, you have to go through an annual inspection. And New York State is part of, I believe, 23 states. We meet the federal requirements to do the heavy duty inspections. Inspected by a commercial shop, inspected by your shop using a qualified technician, inspected by a qualified inspector on site at your carrier's location. So what makes you qualified to be an inspector? You go into Part 396.19. Most carriers are responsible, okay? And you are qualified this way. Understands the inspection criteria set forth in Part 393, Appendix A. Knowledgeable of and has mastered the methods, procedures, tools. Capable of performing inspection by reason of experience. Well, how do you get your experience? Successfully completed state or federal training program, certified from a state Canadian province, okay, and so on. Specified training experiences and so on. Okay. So I'm going to back up a little bit. If you notice over here, successfully complete, like in New York State, for you to do inspections, okay, you have to pass a New York State test. So that's where that comes in. There's a side note. Provides qualification requirements for anyone inspecting, repairing, service, or maintaining brakes. We call that a brake inspector. Is an employee of a motor carrier that is responsible at all tasks related to brakes. So qualifications to be a brake inspector are similar to qualifications required to perform annual inspections. So now all of a sudden, not only are we talking about annual inspectors, of course, an annual inspector will be that person, but what about the guy that does work on the brakes and inspector for that? They have to have certain qualifications, okay? And I'm going to back up here. I have had phone calls in our state here where a fleet has been audited and the company will call me, listen, they came in here and evidently we don't have anybody here that's certified to do brake adjustments and brake inspections. And they gave me your number because you do those certification courses. So yes, you can get caught, with your pants down on that stuff if you ever get audited, and the audits are getting ramped up a little bit more than they have in the years past because that COVID left no choice, and they're finding out that, oh my gosh, we can do audits, much quicker over the phone. Just send me the records, and so they were able to ramp those up. These are the guys that will do the roadside enforcement. The only reason I have this slide in here, I'll tell you right now, is that my experience is when I do trainings for the industry, is like, shit, these guys don't repair vehicles. They don't drive vehicles. Why are they out there doing enforcement? They have to go through some very rigorous training, okay? They go through what part A, part B, and so on. And, and then I sometimes provide some, more training to them so they know, does the knee bone connect to the shin bone and all that stuff. Because I'm one of those firm believers. You can look at something, but you also need to put together the whole package. How does it work and everything. So that's all they do, and they get very proficient with that stuff. So I just wanted to show that real fast. Little bone, I think Chi said we're going to continue with some of the trainings, and I'm just trying to show you some props that we're going to use in the future. I got an ABS board and all sorts of stuff. So hopefully if this gets off the ground, we'll do quite a bit over here, so, and I do driver's trainings. And the only other reason I guess maybe I'm showing these slides is that there's probably somebody always sitting back there and say, the hell does Swede know? What makes him qualified? Take my word for it. I'm not going to tell you my age, but I've been doing this for years. Annual inspection requirements. This is huge. Back in 2016, they added ABS to the annual inspection. Prior to that, it wasn't as part of the annual inspection. You could get a roadside violation. It's an easy hit finding ABS because we're all hooked up with those ABS lights over there. But they actually added this. So now if a vehicle comes into your shop, or if you're responsible to do an inspection, you need to make sure that that ABS is working properly. Okay? So that was added in 2016. The next one here, if you have heavy duty vehicle guys in here that work with air brakes with automatic slack adjusters, you need to keep this in mind. Same year, 2016, I believe was June or July, this was added. Any brake that's found to be out of adjustment initial inspection must be evaluated to determine why the automatic brake slack adjuster is not functioning. Problem must be corrected in order for the vehicle to pass inspection. It is not acceptable to manually adjust automatic brake adjusters without first correcting. Look, guys, what am I saying here? What I'm saying here is that vehicle comes into your shop, okay, years past, if the brakes were out of adjustment, you got down there, you got your wrench, you went in there, got your tape measure, you adjusted it up, and you let it rip. Now you can't do that. And the reason is that if that automatic slack adjuster is out of adjustment, there's got to be something wrong. Just think of the word automatic slack adjuster. And you can't blame the automatic slack adjuster. I mean, think about all the other areas, cam bushings and so on, and whatever the case may be. And, I always use the example, some other shop fleet put all brand new shoes on there, right? And then it comes in drum, and they come to, say, for example, our shop for an annual inspection, and a slack is out of adjustment. Well, Brian will go underneath it, and when he goes through it, he'll probably check the cams and cam bushings, and all of a sudden the cam bushing is going like this. And Brian has every right to say, nope, can't give you a sticker till you get those cam bushings and cams replaced. But I put new shoes and brakes on. But however, it's out of adjustment. Why? Now, they didn't hire thousands of federal automatic slack adjuster cops to check up on us. It's a no-brainer. These vehicles get pulled over on the side of the road. It's like, hey, I noticed you have a new sticker on there. Brakes are out of adjustment. What's up? Bingo. Who did the last inspection? So this requires to look at possibly the whole system, other components. So keep that in mind if you didn't know that.
Step on it. Let it on it. Let it up.
We had a little communication problem here, but we were trying to prove a point here.
Let it up. Step on it. Light it up. Step on it. Light it up.
All right, that's enough. You saw the step on it and everything else. And the next slide is going to say, what are you seeing? Is it a violation? If so, what violation? So I'm going to go back. I'm not going to put it on, but there's the slack adjuster you were looking at. In our shop, we try to do a team thing. Somebody's going to step on the brake. Somebody's going to go down there, take the measurement because our names are going on sticker. In this particular case, I was up on top and my son Brian was underneath, and he's over there telling me to step on the brake. So I step on the brake, and both of us heard air exhausting as I was stepping on the brake. So I said, oh, there's got to be something wrong. So what basically was happening here is every time I was stepping on the brake, and visually you could see that, it was the park brake that was applying the service brake. So if you don't understand a concept, then this is something that I cover in the brake courses, how that works and what happens. So this vehicle could have been out there for who knows when, whoever inspected it last, okay? And unbeknownst to this driver, it's a smaller dump truck. Every time he was stepping on the brake, he was using his park brake, not his service brake. So this is where the next slides come in. What are you seeing is a violation. So what? Well, if you don't know, it's never going to be a violation for you or the roadside guys even. But yes, we know, okay, because that's some of the things we learn in the brake courses that I do. Inadequate brake system, inadequate brakes for safe stopping, inoperative defective brakes, insufficient braking force, because you're not going to get the same force out of that park brake spring. You know, so again, yeah, it could be a problem. And I knew we were on the right path is because the only time the park brake would be utilized as a brake is if I lost my primary air over here. We looked at the cage, both were up, bingo. Next thing we did, replaced the valve, and we were right back to normal. What are you guys seeing over here? I'm being a wise guy again. If you haven't noticed, okay, it's not a violation, but I kind of get a kick out of some of the work that gets done outside over there. I mean, in case you didn't notice, shock absorber is upside down. So these are stuff that after a while, it's like, wow, look at this, look at that. This is a fun industry. Not really a fun industry. It's a hard industry. Roadside inspections, I'm heading to the North American Standard Out of Service Criteria. That's that book over here. So I'm going to cover a little bit of that book because this is important, because when your vehicle's out on the road and these guys pull you over, okay, you need to kind of have a pretty good fair idea. Why did they pull it over? What are they doing? What is this out of service stuff about? What it does is Appendix A is your annual inspection, okay, that you do annually. Out of service criteria, I told you, ramps it up a little bit, okay? They allow you some leeway, okay, but you're still going to get a violation. The out of service allows 20% of defective brakes on non-steering axles and a certain latitude on air leaks before placing vehicle out of service. So the way it works, I'm going to keep it simple, okay? And you can go in Appendix C and see that, you know, I'm going to skip on the slide because I want to, the way it works here, guys, is so, for example, out of service criteria, that book I had, if you have a combination vehicle that has 10 wheels, before that vehicle gets placed out of service, you would have to have 2 of the brakes defective. If you have 1 of them defective, you're still going to get a violation. You're going to get written up, but you're not going to be put out of service. And that's what this is about. We call it the 20% rule, okay? The out of service uses 13 errors found in Appendix A as basis for the out of service. Yeah. If you're out of service, vehicles got to be repaired on the location of the inspection before it can be put or towed to a repair facility. Yeah. You have it in a slide, and again, anybody can purchase these. You know, they're well worthwhile doing it. So on the roadside, this is an example, you're out of service. You know, the enforcement guy puts there, okay, call your shop, do whatever the case may be. This particular case coinciding with that sticker, power assist for brakes leaking. I put this one on here, guys, because think about commercial motor vehicles. Think about how many of you guys work on commercial motor vehicles are not air brakes. They're hydraulic brakes, air over hydraulic, all sorts of stuff out there. So you will have to do the same thing as the big boys. You fall in the same category. So it's not just tractor trailers. This was on the roadside. I like using that as a perfect sample. So what happened was that thump you heard was an officer on the roadside hitting the tire. Thump, thump, thump. Well, it was at the end of the day, so there were two officers trying to get this guy out. They're trying to go home too, so they were double teamed on that. Otherwise, they would never have found it. One officer's on top, thump, thump, thump. The other officer's down there looking at it. Holy moly. I just gotta try to watch my language. Every time you're whacking this thing, my chamber is coming out. So Paul, the officer, he calls me. He says, Swede, you got a minute? I said, yeah. He says, we're underneath here. We're doing this. Thump, thump, thump. I says, do me a favor. Shoot me a video. So I'm in Buffalo. They're all the way, 100-some miles away. And I says, wow. I says, Paul, I says, you know what? You definitely have an issue. The only connection I can see with this is the ABS. Just think about it. You got a computer, you got your solenoids over there, okay? So every time the guy was thumping on it, somehow must have been doing something with the ABS, and ABS was activating that push rod. So I told him, I says, I'm going to save that. I'm going to use it in trainings because it's cool, So he asked me, where would I put this? I said, well, first of all, or should I even make a notation? Well, you should make if you can throw it in 396.3, what we call a catch all in a general, because if you try to put it in 393 under ABS, you'd have a hard time kind of like saying it's specifically this, that, or whatever. But you definitely need to do something and let them know whether you write a violation in 396.3 or make a notation. Because you can imagine, this is an icy road, wet roads and stuff, and this guy's going every time the deal. Inadvertently, that brake could come on. And guys, one of the things I do in brake courses is balance. Balance of the braking system is huge. So, but that was a good slide, If you don't believe me, why are you over here watching this? Why do I do the long versions? In that part 390, every employer shall be knowledgeable and comply with all regulations contained in the subchapter. Every driver and employee shall be instructor regarding shall comply with all applicable regulations contained. Okay. Here's another one.
Brake, please. And release. On the brake. And release.
Usually we don't put them up on the roadside, but in this particular case, driver step on the brake, nothing is there. Where would you find it? Steer axle failing to apply. Yes, it's out of service. I don't want to get into too much of a discussion. These are rotors, guys. I'm going to tell you right now, these are the hardest area to try to make a decision. Should I fail, pass, and so on? Most of the time in our shop, and hopefully in your shop too, but fail anything like that, or even if it's not as bad as this, the customer trusts us. So you know what? You'd make all the sense in the world. Go for it. But I'm going to tell you right now, even on the roadside, these are hard, So same truck, hydraulic brake. And what part would you find it? If you went in there, believe it or not, there's a section in your regulation book that deals nothing with hydraulic brakes. It's right there. However, come on. New line. Somebody did put a new line in and it's still leaking. I got called on this particular vehicle on Saturday. One of the officers had some other issues, but when I go out, I try to snag pictures and all that stuff. Spring, moving, situation like this, Chances are pretty good the axle is going to move too when the guy is trying to steer. Now, I haven't even gotten into pre-trip of drivers. That's a whole different game over here too, because as shop people, we can't control this stuff here unless we did a really lousy job in maintenance. But however, a driver needs to have responsibility too on all of these. In the regulation books, axle positioning, parts broken, missing, resulting in axle loose shift, and that's where you would find it. So I'm giving you a little bit of a, like I said, introductory. So I might question, what type of equipment is this? What are we looking at? What part? You can see this is a smaller trailer. You know, it's not a air brake huge trailer. It's still a commercial motor vehicle, and you can see the gaps in there. All right, will be written up. If you're doing an annual inspections, you need to look for this kind of stuff, because when that vehicle goes out and your name is on it, that's egg in your face. Out of service, however, that book I said, that criteria, 1/4 or more of the leaves in a spring assembly broken, any leaf or portion. So here's our kind of like, we'll give you a little. We're not gonna, until you reach to this point, then we'll put you out of service. But you're doing annual inspections, none of this counts. You do not have any broken leaves or anything, and that's the differences. By the way, look at the rust over here. That didn't happen just yesterday. So I travel a lot. I do a lot of brake trainings and stuff, okay? And I ran across this here. This is a new recyclable spring developed by a new suspension manufacturer. They're looking for distributors. If interested, shoot me an email or something, or I'll get you hooked up. Chances are pretty good because there's a lot of exemptions for farm covered vehicles and so on. It might actually meet some exemptions for transporting their product. Okay. Installation is easy. Just stick that, suspension piece in there, get some strap, tie it up, require minimum tools. So it actually, guys, I actually one of the enforcement guys sent that. That's the way they found it. So frames, only one section like this, A, B, C, D, E. And all I want to tell you about frames is if you take your time, read through that section, you got the handout, and all you got to picture is that you have a section that going from one end of the wall to the other end of the wall. You got a long, long vehicle. Just think about the frame. Think about all the cross members. Think about the cab that's hooked to it. You have a lot of area for violations in there. Okay? This frame, suspension violations, just think about it. Tires, there are differences, of course, out of service. And if you looked at it, requires a tire trip depth of 430 seconds on power unit. Okay, this is my regular regulation. This is not out of service, 393.75. And you guys that inspect vehicles, you're always looking at 430 seconds. Okay, 230 seconds on all other axles. The out of service does let you go down. Okay, 230 seconds tire trip on power unit, steer axles, 130 seconds. So there's a little bit of latitude. There is a difference. This slide here, if you look over here, say, for example, if you had two major grooves over here, right, that were down. So this vehicle comes in for an inspection. However, these grooves are down on the bottom, okay? They're on the bottom over here. There's your road. So you're happy with it. Everything else around looks good. You put your sticker on. Maybe a driver does a pre-trip. So this vehicle gets pulled over by enforcement on the side of the road. Murphy's Law. Where is this going to wind up being? It's going to wind up being on top. The officer is going to ask that driver, did you do a pre-trip? Yes, I did. The officer is going to look in the truck, see a new inspection sticker. Then when he goes over there and sees that tire, says, you got to be kidding. You actually said you did a pre-trip? And I noticed somebody put a new sticker. All I'm saying is we sometimes need to make sure, how are we doing these inspections? This is a good one. Now, what happens is on most vehicles, doesn't matter if it's a car or whatever, my advice always is, and we do it in our shop because we rotate tires, and not always are the tires the same. Front 60 pounds, rear 80. So we switch them, but are you changing your tire pressures according to the tag? So we have a habit here that I don't even want to guess. I don't care what the tire says on it. I go to the door tag. My son Brian is very, very good at this. So what happened is you also have load ranges. Okay, and I'm going to go real fast because I'm actually looking at the clock and we're getting almost down to the nitty gritty here. So you got the different load ranges here, load range C and so on and so on. So basically, you're also looking at pressures, but in this particular case, okay, there was an alterer. A huge body was put on there, and the tire information was put on there, right, Brian? Mm-hmm. And basically, how did you find it? So I'll come a little closer so you can.
I was doing a PM and I checked the door tag to see what to set the tire pressures at. And I went to set the tire pressures and I couldn't go to 120 on whatever tires they were because they weren't rated. They were the next size down, next ply rating down tires. So they had the wrong tires on.
Yeah.
And then I realized, hey, something's wrong.
Yep. And my point being is Brian does check for that stuff. He's kind of like, he looks for things that are like, this doesn't make sense. But I was on a roadside real fast. I don't have time to tell too many stories, but I got one officer loves checking buses and stuff. And on Saturdays, he'll call me up. Hey, can you come up here? I found this something a little bit different. Yeah, give me a few minutes. I'll come down there and everything else. So on this one Saturday, he had a bus over there. It was a smaller bus, and somebody had changed the tire. So he's doing a kind of like a weight thing, putting it on scales just to see if everything works and stuff. And guess what? The vehicle could not comply. They'd had to go out of service. So I'm being a wise guy, says, you know what? If you're doing your scaling, why don't you take the passengers, put them all on the one side, to balance it out, and he didn't appreciate it. No, we were laughing about it, but no, that's not the way it works, All right, go for it. I guess this is self-explanatory.
They're tight though.
Yeah, but the lug nuts are tight. Very good point. Yeah.
It should pass.
Yeah, it should pass. You gotta raise this stuff. You gotta look at him. Touchy feely. You can't beat that. You can see this going up and down. Okay. And the next slide. Actually, this is if you've never seen a violation sheet. Here it is. Axle number 1, left side tie rod, ball sockets loose, exceeding 1/8 up and down movement, measured with hand pressure.
April 1st. This is a Freightliner Columbia over-the-road tractor stopped for a tire dumping tread. It's just inspected March 7th. That was 3 weeks ago. On axle number 3 left. Driver on the brake. Relay. On the brake. Relay.
Perfect sample. It was just inspected 3 weeks ago. Really? And this is why we get into trouble.
Release. One more time.
This was actually on the roadside, guys. Somebody, one of the officers sent that to me. Actually, they were busting me a little bit because they called up, hey, I'm going to shoot you a video. This guy says it just came out of your shop. I says, I says, we had fun with this. It wasn't from our shop. They're just trying to bust my balls. But this is the kind of stuff you see out there.
Release.
It's another phone call from an officer. You see where it was worn over here? And he called to say, is that right? I says, no, it's not right. And you don't see the whole thing. I got a full picture of that. One of the problems is they changed the slack adjuster. You can see it had a double clevis. It was probably a Rockwell or something. And it went into a Haldex and they didn't do the rod correctly. And this is not right. So, a lot of pressure here, guys. Okay. If I went hopefully you guys come back. There's one segment that I'm going to use this board over here, and that's one of the things I'm going to walk you through to see how much force is coming out of springs. That stuff can hurt you. I don't want to spend too much time right now, but I will revisit that thing if you guys happen to come to that next, it's a teaser, guys. Yeah. On the roadside, you cannot see this. How would you? To actually verify that you have a worn drum, discards and everything else, you have to get a gauge on. You can't really do that while it's on. All right. I'm going to skip that right now. I'm going to go right into drums. You see this crack over here? Okay. And I'll be very honest with you. I can miss this crack all day long. So can you. If you have a dust shield on here, for example, and this was up on top, you got a huge spring pack over here, you can't get your head in it. All I'm pointing out is that we don't live in a perfect world, but we need to make every attempt to find those kind of things. Because the problem is we're back to the same thing when it was in, and you're looking at it's way up here. However, now it's down here. It's like, oh, look at that cracked drum. Yeah, this is huge. I don't care if you're working on cars or whatever the case may be. Oh, wow, look at that crack. How could somebody miss it? You can miss it because if that vehicle's sitting still and that crack was behind the pads and the caliper, you could miss it. Okay, window of opportunity isn't always there. And we're getting pretty close to the end here, guys. Hoses are a huge issue. I had put together a huge PowerPoint on nothing but hoses, explaining what hoses, the testing they go through. And you can see over here the numbers. What do they mean? For example, date of manufacture, nominal outside diameter. Letter A stands for air, and if you have to get hydraulic hoses, those are the numbers you're going to look for. But hoses are huge, guys. It's what you need to do. You need to inspect this stuff. This definitely would be out of service if I was doing nothing but a hose thing, because you can see this strands over here. This is a cinch shoe. These are all from Roadside. So this one here, I had a bunch of enforcement guys here, state troopers here in the classroom, and we were doing a day thing because once in a while we try to refresh everything. And one of the guys actually from our capital, he ran a commercial vehicle enforcement guy. He made a question. Listen, when we're on the roadside, we do this and we look for little kinks in here. And, I've often thought about it, and a lot of guys will straighten it out and they let it run up and down the road. Is that okay? Is that hose okay? So I says, that's a very valid question. So I took my camera, I went inside there. I picked a hose. Picture's worth 1,000 words. Might look good on the outside, but what's happening on the inside? So these are the last couple of sets of slides here. Okay, lighting, part 393. You got it in there. It'll show you. I showed you in the book, but I want to get over here because we're going back to that trailer over there too. This is the issue. Okay. Do you know what these ratings are? P2, PC, or P3, PTC2 rated, okay? And I will do you a very quick 2-second thing here. So if you can put over here. So what happens is, if you've ever noticed, you could have a square front over here and it's square over here, but gee, there isn't no corner lights on this square, okay? What happens is if you use a PC marker light, okay, now this is a P2, P3, but if you use a PC3, and that's why in the beginning we wanted to show you, Brian came up with this idea, why don't we turn this on, and you saw how bright this was. Well, the PC by law allows you to, if you have it on the corner here, okay, you don't need it on the corner in the front, because just the way it's designed, the LEDs and the configuration of lens, you should be able to see it. So that's what this is all about. Okay. And I actually put a lighting one together for enforcement guys because I had a lot of questions. And I'll guarantee you right now that most parts guys don't know it. Most shops don't know that's the case, because at first glance, these lights will look the same dimensions and so on, you know. But you have that in your thing. So we're going to wrap it up here. That LEDs, okay, the LEDs. I promise you guys, okay, and we're running late. She gets on me if I run a little too late here. But the answer...
You're on a little bit, but you can go a little more. People are loving it, Swede. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, G. But the way it works with LEDs is, I asked a question from you guys, if you have 2 of the 9 out, I'm just picking some numbers, is it a violation, you know, and so on and so on. It is not a violation, guys, just so you know, okay? If you go to the regulations, it is not a violation. Now, Canada did come up with a percentage, I believe, last year or so. We have not yet. So if you're doing strictly a federal annual inspection, you can't technically recheck that. But your customer, your vehicle can take a chance on the road. A officer can they can revert to what I call the vehicle traffic laws if they cannot properly see that light when it's lit within, you know, each state has their own kind of little thing going on. And I'll pick like in New York State, 500 feet, they could write you a traffic ticket. Now, I did verify with New York State because they have nothing in New York State annual inspection requirements. All they have is every light has to work properly. So when that vehicle comes into our shop and I'm following by the letter of the law, and there's 2 of the LEDs of the 9 are not working, I am sticking to that. Light is not working properly. We will not put our name on it, right, Brian? Until you replace that, you get that light replaced. And I'm staying within the boundaries of the laws. And we're going to keep on, hopefully, you know, G and Dorman will give the blessing so we keep on doing that, because we're going to cover a lot of stuff when we get into the breaks too. For example, you know, I was going to ask you guys, you know, those of you that are heavy duty, of course, if you have a brake chamber, say like a 30-30, both sides are long stroke, right? So one went bad, you go to find one, but you can't find a long stroke. The trucks always have to roll, don't they? You know, we're living under pressures. Can you go on the shelf and get a standard 30-30 brake chamber and put it in its place? And I was going to ask you guys just to see what kind of answers, because a lot of times guys will come back, no, you can't do that. Yes, you can. It is not illegal. Industry practice-wise, should you do that? No, you should try to keep it long strokes, you know. Does that make sense? So if you want, again, keep on doing these seminars and stuff, man, I enjoy doing this. You know, it was a rough day for Brian and I because we wound up being shorthanded, but I'm thinking it's working out good, and give you a little bit of taste of what we're going to cover. Like I said, we're going to probably hopefully get into the breaks next. Of course, it doesn't substitute day or 2-day courses, but, you know, every little bit you can do. I think G and I were talking that we're gonna do some maybe introduction to air brake system, because that's I have my own way of doing it. Make you understand that. We'll probably do a segment on disc brakes. Speaking of disc brakes, Dorman products. Dorman had purchased Dayton. Dayton is huge into disc brakes. I mean, you know these people more as a wheel end and hubs and stuff like that. But hey, it's a huge market in there, and I don't blame Dayton for getting into this end, because just think about that. We're getting more and more disc brakes out there, so that means you're getting away from the drum area, and business wise it makes sense. Okay, I'm going to lose the drum business eventually, let me migrate into the disc brake. I mean, there's absolutely nothing wrong. So you can get the brakes, you can get the hubs, all that stuff, you know. So this is what it's all about. You know, you shop around, you get it wherever, and you know, and they make some good quality product. Just trying to throw a little plug there. But any questions?
Oh, Swede, we had a lot of good comments, and you know, people are loving the class. You will be back next month. You know, you got my blessing, and of course, Dorman Training blessing. It's more important than mine.
Yeah, yeah.
At any rate, we do want to thank you all for coming out. I want to thank Swede and his son, Brian, for going through that and some of those great videos. What a good hour of packed information. Now, normally we just stay to 1 hour, but I yacked in the beginning, so we went over 9 minutes. Big deal. You're going to see this up on the Dorman Training website, and I'll throw this up on the ATTS website. Share it with your friends. Let's get you back. You know, next month you'll see the email come out a lot earlier, and we will do more. Upcoming as well will be some classes. Swede will be teaching for Dorman Training out in Kansas at Vision. So we have some classes out there as well. And we're going to be doing some hands-on classes, probably up there in Buffalo, down here in lower New York, and probably all over the place. So stay tuned for more information on that. I will see you next Wednesday for the Lunch and Learn, Dorman Lunch and Learn on auto stuff. It's going to be fuel pumps. Have a great day live from New York. I'm signing off with Swede, Brian, and myself. Have a great one. Take care.